Hi, this is Pastor Jonathan Moore at Outreach Ministries. What is God going to do for you today? New house, new car, new mortgage, new job, new relationship, lasting friendship. I encourage my friends today, look towards God, look towards God, look towards God, look towards the heavens, trust in God that He's going to open up doors and opportunities for you. Read 2 chapters a day in the Bible, spend time in prayer, like-minded Christians, trust in God that He is going to meet your every need. You got to just trust in God that He's going to meet your every need. You got to spend time in prayer. You got to build up an altar of faith towards God, and you got to trust God that He is going to meet your every need. God will meet your every need if you trust in Him. Spend time in prayer. Spend time with like-minded Christians. Trust in God that He's going to meet your every need. Sometimes you gotta build yourself up in the faith and trust in God that He's going to meet your every need. Maybe there's something going on in your life. Maybe you're just saying, is God really real? I just encourage my friends, go to church, spend time in prayer with like-minded Christians and build yourself up in the faith, read the Bible, just hang out with Christian friends, maybe you see somebody on the street, maybe you can just throw them a couple dollars or buy them coffee, have a little chit chat with them and trust in God that He is going to meet your every need. Sometimes in life, people are looking towards God, but they're not sowing seeds of faith. Maybe throw a couple dollars to a friend. Maybe drive somebody to a job interview. Maybe encourage somebody to go to church that's never been there for. Maybe somebody's been to church and they never sang at church. Maybe encourage them to help them sing. Build them up in the faith. God can do anything if you trust in Him. What does it say in the Bible? It says, if 2 or 3 shall agree together in your name, it shall be done. Sometimes in life, I think, there's new opportunities out there. There's a point in my life where I was thinking maybe I can go to Vancouver, BC. What does God want? Does God want us to move across the world to British Columbia? Does He want us to go down the States? Does He want us to go to Vermont? Does He want us to go to Switzerland? What does God want? Spend time in prayer and see what God really wants. Maybe God wants you to start up a new church down the States. Maybe He wants you to go to Switzerland. Maybe He wants to do some kind of outreach ministries throughout the world. You got to believe in God that He can do anything. Trust in God that He is going to meet your every need. What does it say in the Bible? It says, as 2 or 3 shall agree together in your name, it shall be done. You got to trust in God that He's going to meet your every need. This is Pastor Jonathan Moore at Outreach Ministries.